Hello everyone and welcome to a new part of Allplan Basics for Students. My name is Jakob Martin and I'm your instructor for today. And on this third part we are going to talk about architectural modeling in Allplan. So as always, when we start up Allplan, we have this startup window, and again we go into recent projects and quick access with a double click to Allplan Basics Course 1. So the last time we talked a lot about 3D modeling, but this time will be a little bit different, because before we start modeling our architectural elements, we have to do a little bit of work. So we already talked a lot about the open on a project specific basis. And I would highly recommend that we open that one up together and again, because now we are going to create a building structure that fits our project. So in the first step, we will basically modify the already existing building structure. And we are doing that manually just for the reason that we are able to create any kind of building structure that fits any building. So let's go ahead, do a right click on the project Allplan Basics Course 1. As soon as we do a right click, a menu appears. And we are interested in the menu point Insert Structural Level. So you can see we have different structural levels available that are predefined by Allplan. For example, we have site, structure, buildings, story, substory, or any structural level. So far, so good. But the guys who created the IFC structure and are into the IFC structure will see that some of these structural levels will cause trouble when we export IFC. So to cope that, we want to first go to restrictions of building structure. So please do a left click now on restrictions of building structure. And there we have, for example, all the building structures that are generally available. So for example, permitted structural levels, site structure, buildings, and so on. And also the permitted drawing file assignments. So we could modify that to our liking, or we click on the button IFC compliant structure. So basically we click on that button, and what happens, a lot of these structures, like the structure itself, substories, or any structural level, will be dechecked. So we have site, buildings, and stories. And for most buildings, this is more than appropriate. So I would highly suggest that you click on IFC compliant structure, click on OK, and now a menu shows up. The restrictions cannot be applied to the existing building structure. There are structural levels that are no longer required, or there are illegal drawing file assignments. Please correct the building structure in order to apply the selected restrictions, which sounds a little bit frustrating and harsh at the beginning, but it's not too hard. So just click OK. And now we can see that we have a red cross above the first 10 drawings, which looks kind of bad in the beginning, but as soon as we are going ahead and basically build our building structure, these red crosses will disappear as soon as we close the building structure, and you will see that. So let's go ahead and basically build our building structure. So the first thing I already showed you, please do a right click on Allplan Basics Course 1. And after that we go to Insert Structural Level, and now we can see there are only 3 structural levels available because of the restrictions of the building structure we did beforehand. So the first thing we want to do is basically create a building. And after that we can build on top of our building a right click, Insert Structural Level, and now you can see, because you can't basically add a story to a building or a building to a story and vice versa, this is not possible. So what you have to do is you basically have to build on the hierarchy that is set with Allplan. So it's not possible to add a project under a building, but it is possible to set a story under a building. And this is what we are going to do now. And we are going to do that a couple of times, and you will see very soon why we do that. So 2 stories, 3 stories, 4 stories. Let's do just 4 stories for the moment. We will add more later. So the next thing we are going to do is we have to assign the drawings to these different stories. So the first thing we are going to do is we're going to mark the first 10 drawings and basically assign it to the first story. We do that if we do 1 left click on the first drawing, and after that we press down Control and basically mark all the drawings, just like that. And now we can go ahead and basically drag and drop that one into our story folder. So the red cross didn't disappear, but that's not too bad, because as soon as we close the building structure, the story and the assigned drawings will basically be there and assigned, and everything will be perfect. So let's rename our stories. So for example, we have buildings. Let's rename that one. So either you do a slow left click, 2 slow left clicks, or right click and rename. It doesn't really matter. And we will call that one building 1. And there is the story. So we continue with the story, right click, rename, and we will basically call that one import or grid. And you will see later on what's that all about. And after that, we have the next story, and we will basically add the foundation there. Then the next story, base plate. And after that, we will add some columns. Okay, so far so good. And we have our structure. We have more or less folders, more or less labeled as stories, import grid, foundation, base plate, columns, which is kind of good. And now we go ahead and we have to assign more drawings to the already existing parts of the building structure. So right click on foundation. And after that, assign drawing files. Just like that. And now we have different options to assign the drawing files to our building structure. The first option, which comes in really handy, is if we just input certain numbers. So for example, we have drawing 1 to 10 already assigned, and we go ahead and have 11 to 20, for example, and press enter. And we could continue that with the base plate, assign drawing files 21 to 30, which is perfectly fine, or we click on selection list. So please keep in mind, if you click on selection list, 9,999 drawings will be loaded, and if your computer is not that powerful, this may take some time. So you can see, as soon as I click on that one, we can see basically all the drawing files that are available in Allplan. And now we have basically the option to choose different drawing files, just like that. And we can basically drag and drop them into the desired space. So you can do the way you prefer it. So I prefer more or less assign drawing files and just input the numbers. Please keep in mind that every drawing can't be assigned a second time. So if I'd go ahead, for example, right click, assign drawing files and columns, and I want to input 25, which is already assigned on base plate, the following will happen. Some of the selected drawing file numbers could not be assigned as they are used in the existing building structure. And you have to keep that one in mind. And this is the reason why we assign more than one drawing for every substructure that we have created. So to get rid of the red X we are seeing here, I can just choose, for example, the first drawing, click on close, and if I reopen that one, the red cross will disappear. So which is a good thing. So the next thing we're going to build is we're going to add more substructures to our building structure. And to do that one, this is getting interesting because we have grid, foundation, base plate, columns, everything is perfectly fine, okay. And let's go ahead and say we want, for example, walls to be added. So right click, insert structural level, story, and there it is. Okay, this looks good. And now we go ahead and say we want walls. But the order doesn't make any sense at all. So basically, first we have walls, then we have grid, foundation, base plate, columns, and walls should be below that. And this is where it gets a little bit complicated because we have to add basically all the substructures that we have inserted in our building structure and put it on top of walls, just as you would shuffle a card deck. So first we want walls, which should be completely on the bottom. After that we have columns, so we take that one and just put it there. And now we basically dropped columns on top of walls, just like a card shuffle deck. After that we are using base plate, foundation, and import grid. So there it is. And now we have the order that we are basically want to have. So let's go ahead, right click on the walls, assign drawing files, 41 to 50, and there we go. So this is basically the first part that you're learning in this part of the course. So we have our different parts of the building structure and we have to rename them. This is also really important. So basically we have a block foundation there. And we have a strip foundation. We also have one base plate. Just like that. And we also have columns. And we have walls. And it is important that you keep that one in mind, because if we structure it like that, we have a lot of advantages. What you could also do is you could structure the whole project just based on the different levels of your building. But for this part of the tutorial, we are using that one. So we have block foundation, strip foundation, base plate, columns. And please keep in mind, it is also important that the drawings itself are named and not only the folders of the building structure. So the first substructure we are seeing here is importing grid, and we have drawing number 3, and we will call that one grid. Okay, so please keep that in mind if we want to build a building structure that is part of our project. The next thing is that we are basically going to create with this button a floor manager. And the floor manager lets us allow to basically create a floor model. So just for explanation, it is important to understand the workflow. We have a floor manager, and with the floor manager, we are basically creating a height model with different elevations. And the different elevations will be assigned to the drawings. And everything that is on the drawing itself will be assigned to the elevations of the different floors that we assign them to. This may sound complicated at first, but you will understand that in the future very good if we just finish the tutorial. So again, the next part we are going to do, let me redo the step, is we click on Floor Manager. And we click on New Model. And this is basically the option we are facing for our model to create the different elevations. And we will call that one Model 1. So this is also important to note, because I always have students where they want to build a very complicated building with different parts of the building. And for example, if you have a left part and a right part and the heights are different, you are absolutely able to create more than one model and to assign different heights to different models if that is necessary for your project. For the very simple and easy project that we are creating here, this is not necessary, but I just wanted to take this and give you the side note that this is also possible. So we basically have the new model 1. We have number of stories above 0, which is also 1. This is perfectly fine. The number of stories below 0 should be set to 0. And the name of the first story above 0 can be set to ground floor, 0 upper floor, first upper floor. And we basically don't need all of that. Ground floor is perfectly fine. We also have the elevation point of unfinished floor on ground floor, which could be set to 0. And we also have different height settings. For example, clear height between unfinished slabs. And these values are already pre-assigned, but I will still go through them to make sure you get everything right. So the clear height between unfinished slabs can be set for our example project to 430. We have the slab thickness of 0.25, as well as the thickness of the floor slab, which can be set to 0.25 as well. And now, this is also an important part, we don't have a story itself below 0 because the height of the foundation will be set in this part of the menu. So we have the height of the foundation, which can be set to 0.80, so 80 centimeters. And there is also another setting for the absolute max elevation and absolute min elevation points that can be set on these two parts. So I have 480 and minus 1.05. And these are the values that are basically the absolute max and absolute min of the example project that I wanted to give you. We also have the option for the building structure to create or extend the building structure. We don't need that. I already gave you an example how we are going to work with that. So as soon as we're finished, just press on OK. And please expand on the left side the model that we've just created. So there we have a small figure of the structure and the different levels. And this is basically what our finished model should look like. So the bottom level of the structure is set to minus 1.05, which is right. And there is the bottom level F. And this stands for foundation, and we can rename that. So basically 2 clicks on that kind of menu, foundation, and here as well. Then let's go ahead. So the top level foundation is set to minus 0.25, which is a good thing. And we have the bottom level GF, which can be set to ground floor as well. Ground floor. So you don't have to expand that one. It's just for you when we assigned the different elevations to keep track on what we're doing. So basically, we have the clear height of 430, which is also perfectly fine. And we have 0.5 top level structure set to 480. So this is basically what it should look like. So if you're not sure, you should go through every single number that you are seeing here, because if that is wrong, you will experience a lot of mistakes in the future. So after we have finished the part with the floor manager, we can click on OK. And now we are going to assign these different elevations to our drawings. So we have elevation at bottom, elevation at top. And this is where it gets interesting. So we have two options to assign different heights to our building structure. So the first option is we have our foundation. We go ahead and we can assign it to the folder foundation, or we could assign it to a single drawing. This is also possible. So I will go ahead and assign it to the foundation. Right click, assign planes, and let's talk about the foundation. We can now check every box that we want. So for example, we have the foundation here. I will check the box, foundation minus 0.25, minus 1.05. Okay, this looks good. Press OK. Okay. And now the height, elevation at bottom and elevation on top is set for every single drawing. Just for you to understand this kind of step better, if I would assign a plane to a drawing itself, I would just take a random one, maybe just like that, which doesn't really make sense, but that's not part of what I wanted to show you. You can see that the elevation at top will be set in a bluish color, and we have the elevation at bottom, which is set to the foundation, which is also assigned. But because the value is the same, this will not be shown here. So if I would assign a different plane, so for example, something like that, and okay, you can see that the height always changes. So let's take that one, for example. And now we have two different elevations at top and bottom. And this is the reason why there are two blue numbers there. But we don't need that. It was just to explain that to you. So I will delete the drawing file contents and names. All right, so let's go ahead. We have the base plate. Right click, assign planes. And the top of the base plate should be set to bottom level of ground floor, and the bottom should be set to the top level of the foundation. So just take the ones that are relevant for you. So the next thing is to assign these kind of planes to the columns. And again, please take care. I just assigned these heights to the drawing itself and not the complete structure. For this kind of example, it doesn't really make a difference, but you have to keep that in mind that if you set it to the folder where your drawing file is assigned, this will have a different effect because all the drawing files will be assigned to the elevation at top and bottom. So columns, right click, assign planes. They will go from 480 to minus 0.25. And the walls as well, assign planes. They will go from 0 to 430. And just to make it very precise, I will also assign the drawing, the planes to the base plate and the structure itself. And now everything is perfectly fine. So ladies and gentlemen, please keep that in mind. This is the work we have to do before we start drawing our architectural elements. And this may sound like a lot of work, but later on you will see what kind of big effect this has on our workflow and our architectural elements. So let's go ahead and start to create our grid. So basically it's drawing number 3. And we will also go into that drawing. So I just did a double click on the drawing number 3. And now we can go ahead and basically use the role draft and the label design. And we will take the menu grid. So I will basically you can expand it, you don't need to expand it, so I will basically use this kind of view, and there we have axis grid, polar axis grid, and explode axis grid. So basically click on axis grid. And this is what I talked about earlier in the tutorial number 2. We are here in the setting and the view is set to an isometric view. So please take care that you're always in the floor plan. This is important. So we have the settings for our axis grid on our properties menu. And this is also really important. So let's go through that one really quickly. We have a rotation angle. I will demonstrate it to you. Let's set it to 30, which is basically really obvious. The rotation angle can be set to 30. We will set it to 0 because we don't need that one. We have the format. So we have the layer, which is set to raster, which is the German term for grid. And we have the representation. And the good thing is we can set a different representation for the lines of the X and Y direction, which we don't need as well. But I just wanted to give you the information that this is possible if this suits your workflow a little bit better. And now we have the X and Y direction and Z direction. And the good thing is, I mentioned it in the first part of the video, you can also add different values here, and you can also use very simple mathematical functions. So you can basically go ahead and say, okay, I want 5.2 meters at first. So we will insert that value and our grid will look like this. Okay, good. The next part should be 5.4 meters, which is also perfectly fine. And after that, we will basically go ahead and input the value 5.2 meters, which looks very good and is the result that we want. But most grids will be a little bit different. So we could basically go ahead and say, okay, I want the last part of the grid, 5.2 meters, I want that 4 times. And I can insert the value. So for example, 4 times 5.2. And this also works perfectly fine. So you don't have to insert the value 5.2, 5.2, 5.2, 5.2. You can just put there 5 times 5.2 and you're good to go. I just wanted to show you that one as well. And very important to note is also the angle of the X direction. So I can also input the angle of 30, for example. And this is what our grid looks like now. So we are not in an isometric view, we are still in plan view, but it looks kind of like an isometric view. And it is also possible to not only rotate the complete axis grid, but also different direction of the axis grid. We don't need that one as well. So we will set that to 90. And now we go ahead and we have the projection at top and bottom. And this highly depends on your project. So for our project, it's perfectly fine if we have a projection on top of 1 meter and on bottom with 2 meters. So the projection on top is a little bit, on bottom is a little bit longer. And in the Y direction, we have, for example, 2 times 3 meters, which is perfectly fine for our project. We don't need any angle, so we have a rotation of 0 degrees. But now we have the projection at left and right. At left we have 2 meters and on the right we have 1 meter. The Z direction is also set, can also be set. We don't need that as well for our project. So if you have different levels in your project, you can basically set the Z direction to different numbers of distances, but we don't need that. And we can also uncheck the axis display button that we have here. This is basically unnecessary for what we want to do. So now we can go ahead and basically place the grid there and press escape. So even in the animation view, in the central perspective, this kind of grid will also appear. And if you take a very quick look on which height this grid is, you will quickly notice that the Z coordinate is set to 0 itself. So now we can continue and work on that kind of axis grid. So, and this is where these different kinds of settings for the drawing files come in really handy. So let's open on a project-specific basis. We will now set the grid to reference because we don't need to edit this one anymore. And now we can go ahead and basically create our first architectural element, which is the block foundation. So this is the setting I want to give you. So we have drawing number 3 and drawing 11. And please take care, this is also really important. You have to be sure that you check the boxes from the folders that you've created in the building structure. So let's go and close. And now we see our grid in the background. We cannot edit it anymore because it's set to reference, but we can go ahead and basically use the points that we have created. So this is a good thing. So now let's change our role in the action bar. So go ahead, architecture, then we have the different elements. And now we can go ahead and basically click on the button block foundation. We also have different subsettings. We have block foundation, slab foundation, strip foundation. We will use all of them during the tutorial. And the workflow for the architectural elements is kind of the same. And it doesn't really matter what kind of architectural element you're using. So let's use block foundation. And as soon as we click on that, and we already know that one, is that some specific menus will appear for the function that we have just clicked on. And please keep this button in mind because this properties button will reappear every time we are using an architectural element. So this is the properties button, and the properties button basically allows us, if you click on it, to select and modify all the different properties in our block foundation. So the first thing we should talk about is the outline of the block foundation. So we have different options to edit them. So for example, we can choose a rectangular one or like a round one. We don't really need that. But the interesting thing is that we can also edit these kinds of values that are shown here. And for example, we want a length of 1.2 meters. And you can see as soon as I enter the value and press enter, the preview also changes. And the good thing about the preview is that we can also edit the different kinds of views for our block foundation in the preview. So I will just set this one to animation. We could also edit the height, and I won't do that one because we have to talk about that one a little bit more specific. So we just keep that one here. And we also have the positioning. So we can basically edit centered below column, wall, chimney, and I will just uncheck that box because we don't basically need it. Then we have the height, the relative height, material qualities, and we will talk about the relative height. So you can see these kinds of symbols, and I want to do a double click on that one, and we can see a new menu that is popping up. And this menu will be the same for most architectural elements. And it's really important that we work a little bit more with this kind of menu and talk about it a little bit more in depth. So basically we have our architectural element, and every architectural element is represented here with just a gray block. But this is perfectly fine as soon as you understand what that's all about. So let's think about that this is our block foundation. And our block foundation has a top level and a bottom level. And you probably already noticed that we have different planes. We have a plane that is on the top, which has the height of minus 0.25. And we have the bottom that is basically the height of minus 1.05. And I think you've noticed that these are the exact planes that we have assigned to the drawing for the foundation earlier. So we can now basically set different kinds of options to work with these kinds of layers. So the first option that is already activated is relative to lower plane. So we have our top level and we have relative to lower plane, and we don't really want it. So for 99% or let's say 95% of the architectural elements, we will choose for the top level relative to upper plane. And what we're basically creating is a relation between the top layer, which is set to minus 0.25, and assign the top level of the foundation itself to this kind of layer. And we can now basically input the value for an offset. So I could say, okay, I don't want my top layer of the block foundation to be at the height of minus 0.25. I want the offset to be at minus 1. So what would basically happen is that this length that we can see here will be 1 meter. So we have basically minus 1 meter minus 0.25 because we start at that height. So the end value will be minus 1.05. We don't need that right now, but I just wanted to give you the information to explain it to you. So we have 0. And then we have the bottom level. And the bottom level of the foundation can also be set with an offset to 0. So this length and this length will be set to 0. So the height of the top level of the foundation is now, with an offset of 0, minus 0.25. And the bottom level with an offset of 0 is set to minus 1.05. So let's press OK. And we can also see that the preview changed, and we can also see that the height also changed. So let's go ahead. And the pen, we can also add a surface. So let's go to surface. Let's choose, for example, exposed concrete, something like that. Please take care that the show surface element in plan view is deactivated because we don't need it. And there is also a hatching predefined. And I would highly recommend to you that you use a style area. So please don't use a hatching, don't use a pattern filling, bitmap area. You don't need all of that. Please go ahead and use a style area. So we have 301 Beton bewährt, which means concrete reinforced. So let's press OK. And now we have the anchor point for the preview. And this should be set to the middle. So not something like that, because it will basically change the way you are anchoring with your cursor. We will just take that one to the middle. And now we go ahead and we can basically place these kinds of block foundations. Let's do it like that. Related to our grid. And this is a good thing. So we can take a look now at the central perspective. Please keep in mind that you have to activate the navigation mode to basically do that. And now we have created our first block foundations. And we can see all of that in the central perspective, in the south elevation, and in the plan, because these are architectural elements. Okay, so go ahead now. I'm quick saving that one right now. And again, click on Open on project specific basis. We will set the drawing number 11 to reference, and we will go ahead and basically create our strip foundation as well. Let's go to close that one. Let's take the submenu of strip foundation, and there we have properties. Again, so let's go to properties. And now this looks a little bit different because the properties are always related to the architectural component that we are editing. So we have to keep in mind that we have to change this one a little bit. So basically we have this one right here, rectangular. We can also set the width. So basically edit that one to 1 meter. And centered below wall can be deactivated because we don't have a wall created yet. And this is the way we are going to place this kind of positioning. So we have the positioning axis, which should be set to the middle, 0.5 meter on top, 0.5 meter on bottom. And again, you will see this will be the same over and over again during the process of creating different architectural elements. So we can go ahead and double click on relative height again. And because we are in the drawing number 12, we can also see this here. Strip foundation, we can go to top level relative to upper plane. Then we have the bottom level relative to lower plane. And let's take a look at our offsets again. So the offset on top is 0, which is perfectly fine. But now it gets interesting because we have basically the bottom level of the foundation and we will input offset there. So basically we are going to input the offset 0.3. So what happens now, and we will see that in a couple of seconds, is that this length is set with plus to 0.30 and this will move to the top. So let's press OK on that one. We also add a surface, just like that. And we have the box show surface element in plan view. We don't need that. And let's add again the style area 301. Okay, so since this is a strip foundation, it is placed along a line and we will define the line now. So I can go ahead and basically do the first click on this part, click 1, click 2, and now we could add more strip foundations, but let's take a very quick look at the central perspective. And since we added a gap and the offset of 0.3 meters, this is thinner than the block foundation, and this is what we wanted to do. So let's go ahead, escape once, and basically input the different foundations just like that. And because I'm a very lazy person, I'm just going to mirror everything. And this is a really good thing. So you can see that we have our block foundations created, our strip foundations created, and we also talked about the offset. So this is a kind of important thing to keep in mind. And you will learn that if you basically go ahead and change the values of the layers that we have created, you will see that this will also have a big effect on the elements that we have created. And there is also a reason why we went ahead and basically defined a style area. I will talk about that in the next part. But for the end of this part, I just wanted to give you a little bit more input about the different planes that we have created. So if you go on this kind of menu up here, planes, you can see the structure. And because this is a little bit hard to imagine at first, you can just go ahead and turn on the modification mode, and you can see now the different layers or planes that we have created. So, and the height. So you can basically see, all right, we have, for example, the top plane, the bottom plane, and let's measure the 30 centimeters, which is perfectly right. So the length is 30 centimeters. So that worked out perfectly fine as well. Here we will create the base plate, and this will be the top layer for our wall, and this will be the top layer for our columns. So you can see that this is working out really well, and we will create more of these elements in the next part. So stay tuned, and thank you very much for your attention. Bye bye.